All right, so as you can see from the first slide, you're here for the disability application orientation. So if that's not what you want to learn about, then now's your chance to escape the room. This is a presentation that my colleague Brooke and I put together because a lot of people were interested in learning about the process. What does it mean to apply for Social Security benefits? And we found that we were answering a lot of questions individually, one-on-one, and that we thought it might be helpful if we had a presentation prepared so that on a weekly basis, anyone who's interested in learning about applying for disability would have the information they need to go forward. So before we start with the disability application itself, I want to let you know a little bit about FREED. We're what's called a Center for Independent Living, and what that means is that we are a disability rights and resources organization. We do a lot of different things, helping people access assistive technology, helping to apply for housing, all sorts of things. But the most important thing that we do is respect the individual and work to support each individual in accomplishing their goals. So the real reason for FREED to exist is for when people who have disabilities have goals that they want to accomplish and they're not able to do so because of something related to their disability, they can come to FREED and say, this is my goal, this is what I want to do, and we'll say, great, we can support you in the things you have trouble with and you can do the things that you're great at. So that's kind of what FREED is about. It's a lot about respect and individual goal accomplishment. So on to this session. This orientation is to help prepare you to apply for disability benefits. If you're considering, am I someone who is eligible for benefits, what does the process look like? So that's what you'll be learning about today. So what are the disability benefits, and then how do I prepare to apply? So today's goal is to learn, first of all, the difference among a bunch of acronyms that you hear related to Social Security disability. SDI, SSDI, and SSI. Have you guys heard of all this stuff before? Yes, you've heard the acronyms and you've heard people say all kinds of different words related to them, right? Okay, so we're gonna parse out the differences among those three. We're gonna talk about how disability is determined for each of those three, and then the application process itself. If you have questions throughout this, I've put pens on the table. If you have questions, if you would jot them down, and then at the end of today's session, I'll stick with you and answer the questions till you get all the answers that you need. One of the things that's important to us at FREED is to give you information in a way that it makes sense to you. So we've got it visually on the board here, and then I'm talking, but also if you need anything in a different format, please let me know, okay? All right, so what are disability benefits? Basically, they're financial support for people who are unable to work. Today we're going to be talking about benefits provided by the state of California and then benefits by the federal government. Disability benefits in these categories can be for either short-term disability, meaning 12 months or less, or long-term disability, long-term support, which is typically defined as an illness that lasts for 12 months or more, or it is expected to end imminently in death. That's the morbid part of the presentation. So SDI, this stands for State Disability Insurance, and this is administered by the same part of California's government that provides unemployment insurance. It's provided by what's called the Employment Development Department. So for state disability insurance, you have to be unable to work at your current job for at least 8 days, and your disability is expected to last for 12 months or less. So this is usually the kind of disability that people utilize if they're having knee replacement surgery, or they became very ill from an illness. Or it could be if you have something that's expected to last much longer, but you're hoping it's not going to. For example, if you have a stroke and you need income support while you're recovering from that stroke, but you're hoping that you'll make a full recovery. So it's for those short types of things. The thing that's going to be important with state disability insurance is that you be employed or actively looking for work at the time that the disability occurs, and that you have paid into the state disability insurance program. And what that's going to mean is that the employer that you work for is enrolled with the state disability insurance program. and that you're doing work from which that tax is withheld. And so a lot of people in our area work under the table, meaning no taxes are withheld, or work for small employers that are not enrolled with this program. So those are the two pieces that we have to check out before doing an application for the short-term disability insurance. While you're getting state disability insurance, you do have to be under the care of a licensed medical practitioner, and you have to remain under their care. Then there's a little time frame for applying, and your physician is required to complete the medical portion of your claim. You may have seen the short-term disability forms. They look like this. It's a red form, and it's a fairly straightforward form. It's a release that you sign to allow your doctors to give information. You put your name, rank, and serial number, the day that you became unable to work. And because it's a short-term thing, it is fairly easily acquired. So really all that's required is for you to talk to your doctor. You agree that there's an issue going on that should be resolved fairly promptly or hope to be resolved promptly. Your doctor fills out the form, and usually within 2 weeks you have an approval for the short-term disability. So if you have questions about that, jot them down, and I'll answer them after the whole thing. All right, now long-term disability, as I mentioned, is something that is when your disability is expected to last 12 months or more. And there are two types with this. One is the SSDI, that stands for Social Security Disability Insurance. That's a federal program. The other is called Supplemental Security Income, SSI. So these are both federal programs administered through the Social Security Administration and occasionally getting a little bit of input from the state. So what are the two things? SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance is, insurance means this is something that you pay into. So again, this would be working for an employer who withholds taxes and like Medicare, Social Security taxes from your paycheck. And so to be initially eligible for disability insurance, you have to have bought into it. Insurance implies you're paying something to get something. And so this is something that is not an entitlement that everybody gets. This is based on your payment into the system. And as a basic thumbnail, it asks, have you worked a job from which Social Security taxes were withheld for 5 out of the last 10 years? Okay, so it's based on your work whether or not you can access Social Security disability insurance. The amount that you would get is based on your work and your payment into the system. The application for disability insurance benefits, and I have copies of this in your packet. It's pretty straightforward. It's about 5 pages. It's the shortest disability application, and it asks basic name, rank, and serial number. Are you a citizen? Where were you born? Have you used any other names? What conditions are going on? It asks if you have any military service. It asks if you have any other type of pension that might be available. It asks about marriages and children and employers. And all of those questions are simply to assess all the different possible ways that you might be eligible for Social Security disability insurance. If you have not worked outside the home, but your partner has, your spouse has, you may be eligible for this through their work history. If you're an adult child who's been disabled since before the age of 18, you may use this application to apply for disability insurance based on your parents' earning record. So that's why it asks those questions about marriage, about children, and about work. So SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance, is strictly something that you pay into and you receive based on what you've paid into the system. All right, now SSI, Supplemental Security Income. You'll notice the word insurance is not in this. This is not something that you pay into. SSI is the type of long-term disability that is available if you have not paid into the system. This is something that is there to supplement your income. Maybe you've paid into the system, but based on what you've paid in, you only get $300 a month, hypothetically. The Social Security Administration and California say, well, to really make it, you have to make at least $900 a month. So SSI, Supplemental Security Income, is to supplement what you may be getting through Social Security disability insurance to bring you up to about a $900 level. And that varies depending on whether you're homeless, getting housing for free, those types of things. So this is the aspect of long-term insurance that you would access if you haven't paid into the system. So it's helpful. Now, that said, you do have to fill out that 5-page SSDI application because the Social Security Administration is going to look very carefully to see, is there any money there that we might be able to give you, right? So they're going to ask you to fill out the SSDI application just to check every possibility of, is there any money there that we could give you? And then based on that, you may or may not need to apply for SSI. So the SSI application, as you can see from my lovely inspector here, asks a lot of really rude, nosy questions. This is the most intrusive part of the application, and the reason that this is very intrusive is that SSI, Supplemental Security Income, is based strictly upon financial need. That is, assuming disability is determined to exist, the payment source of SSI exists purely on financial need. So to do this application, it takes a good bit of research and information. So I'm going to go through a lot of the pages here just to give you an idea of the kinds of things you need to be thinking of and need to be collecting or trying to remember. You know, use auxiliary brains in this application. I definitely don't expect any one individual to remember all this stuff about their life. It's all very detailed. And so if you have somebody that cares about you, that's familiar with your history or your financial setup, this is something that can be very useful to have someone work with you on. So you'll see from the first page, it's very similar. It's all the name, rank, and serial number stuff. At the very bottom, you have a chance to let them know, would you like to receive this income deposited to your bank, or do you want a debit card? So this asks a lot of the previous questions that you've seen before. So the second page is about marriage and when you became unable to work. The next page is about your citizenship, and there's a lot of citizenship questions. Most of the folks in the county here that I've worked with, most of them are citizens, so the next couple of pages typically you don't have to deal with, but they do ask if you are not a citizen, the level of information about your relationship to our country. Part 2, their living arrangements, it asks what kind of circumstances are you currently living in? And based on your answers to those questions, whether you're in a household, you're in a care home, you're in jail, you're in a skilled nursing facility, or you're homeless, those different types of living situations result in different amounts of money just based on formulas that Social Security uses that I don't pretend to know. So it asks specifics if you're in an institution, what your household looks like, who else lives with you, are there children in the home, and what kind of income do they have? Is there a spouse in the home? Do you own it? Do you rent it? Does anybody contribute to your household expenses? And what do your expenses look like? So this is the kind of really rude, nosy stuff that Social Security and the state of California are using to determine, is there a financial need for this support for this disabled individual. It asks if there's anybody that doesn't live with you that helps you. It asks for any vehicle or property that your name is on, whether you're living there or not, whether you're using the vehicle or not. And this will be cross-checked with DMV records, real estate records, that kind of thing. It asks about financial accounts. It asks about things like life insurance, burial plans, if you've sold anything for less than market value. So a lot of very, very detailed questions. It asks very detailed questions about what your current income is, and this could be income from work. It could be general assistance income that you're getting from the state. It could be CalWORKS, which is California's name for temporary assistance for needy families, food stamps, pension, work comp, any source of income that you have. So this asks about it for you, and if you are married, it asks for that information about your spouse. So, so you can see there's a lot of detail that is required by this. It asks about self-employment, help you apply for food stamps. And so that's the basic information that is requested for SSI. So again, this is the financial aspect of the application. So any questions about that, I will definitely look forward to answering, because that's kind of a lot of information, and it's really, it can be pretty overwhelming. And that's one of the reasons that Brooke and I do assist people with this application. So one of the things that I'll talk about at the end is that if after learning kind of what all these pieces look like, if you feel like, okay, I'm ready to go, I understand that, I can comprehend a lot of written words, writing, all that stuff is pretty easy, then I've got some forms here, and I'll say, here you go, this is what you need to fill out at home to prepare. If it feels like this is pretty overwhelming, and there's just no way that you feel like the concentration that it takes and the follow-up and all of that, then Brooke and I would be very happy to make an appointment with you after this for a time for us to sit down one-on-one and give you the support that you're looking for with this process. All right, so the disability report. This is where we're going to talk about what emotional, mental, cognitive, physical things Social Security is looking for when you make an application for disability. And this one, it doesn't ask a lot of detail. It's up to you as the applicant to provide a lot of detail. This is where we want to be able to paint the picture of what's going on for you. So, again, the first page of this is basically name, rank, and serial number. It's all this boring stuff that you just have to write it all down yet again. It asks if there's someone other than a doctor who's familiar with what goes on for you. Maybe a neighbor that you're close to, a sibling, an adult child, a parent, someone who's not a doctor who can say, yeah, I've seen Michelle out, and this is the stuff that she can do, and this is the stuff that gets in the way. Or I work with Brooke all the time, and I can see these things, are really working great, and these things seem to be getting in the way. So a third party, not a medical person, but someone that understands you and what kind of challenges you experience, and who's willing to talk about them at some length, again, to help paint the picture. So one of the important things there is section 3 on the page is where it says medical conditions. It is important here that you write down every medical condition. I've worked with a lot of people who say, well, I'm fine putting down, I've got this lower back pain, I can't do it, or I'm not able to see well, or something like that. But I don't want to put down my mental health stuff. I don't want anybody to know about that. I mean, I have depression, but I don't want anybody to know. I would say that it is very important to put the stuff down that you're embarrassed about too. Anything that doesn't feel comfortable, but that is a diagnosis that impacts the way that you live your life, your ability to make decisions, your ability to work, your ability to get around is really important. You don't have to put down every single diagnosis. You can certainly avoid putting down your mental health diagnoses, but what I would tell you based on experience is that that is not helpful. One of the reasons that you're applying or considering applying for disability is because of the things that get in your way of accomplishing your goals. Social Security doesn't need to know how things go for you on your best day, because that's not why you're applying. If every day was like your best day, you wouldn't be in here checking this out, you know? So when you apply for Social Security disability, it's really important that you talk about what your worst day is like, because those are the days when you need support. That's what Social Security needs to understand. And so, unlike when we're working together one-on-one with other goals, when we're working together to apply for disability, it's very, very important to paint a picture of your worst day. And then we'll move on after that, right? You don't have to focus on that, but we do have to do that for the application so that Social Security has some idea about what's really going on and why you're looking at the application. So I would encourage you to put down every single medical condition that you're currently diagnosed with. Historical things, not so important. So let's say you can't move because you can't move your shoulders or your arms without pain, let's say, because 20 years ago you had a car wreck and it broke your back. You wouldn't put broken back on this. You would put arthritis and bulging discs. You would put what's currently getting in the way of your being able to work. And that's what Social Security is looking at. They don't really care about anything else other than your ability to work. So we want to talk about what gets in the way of your ability to work. Okay. It asks for your height and weight. It asks about whether you're working. It asks when you stopped working or if you had to alter your work schedule to adapt to it. It asks about education and training. The reason for that is, again, Social Security is going to look and see, well, if you've been a logger and you have this, you know, you're not able to use your left arm anymore because of nerve damage from a tree falling on your shoulder. They're going to look at your education and training, and they may go, oh, you trained as a, I don't know, give me something, a sous chef. I don't know. If you've trained as a typist or you trained as something else. Logging may be all you've ever done, but they're going to look at that and go, oh, well, you know, it may be possible that there's a different kind of work where you can make more money than you're going to get from Social Security disability. And so that would be important information going forward. It asks about your school. It asks about your job history. It's looking for your work history in the last 15 years or your 5 most recent jobs, whichever is less. So if you had 40 jobs in the last 15 years, you only have to list the last 5. So I talked to a lady last week, and she, in the last, about the last 15 years, she'd had 38 jobs. Now that is somebody who's really trying hard to work, right? Different jobs, different things, not successful with that, but it's a really important history. So that's something we might write about in the comments section, but for this part of it, she only needs to list the last 5 jobs. All right, and if you've only had 1 job in the last 15 years, then it asks that you fill out this form about, hey, what was that job looking like? What were you required to do? How is your disability impacting your ability to do that? Section 7, medicines. This would include prescribed medicines as well as non-prescription things that any of your doctors recommend. Again, it's really important to list every single thing that you're currently taking, what doctor prescribed or recommended it, and the reason for the medication. This can be a good cross-check with your diagnoses listing. I was working with a gentleman who has congestive heart failure. And he was on all the stuff you would expect from that, like diuretics to get the fluid out of his lungs and all that kind of stuff. But as I looked through that listing, I saw the listing of an antidepressant. Well, depression is really common following heart issues. So that led me back to say, hey, we didn't list depression on your list of diagnoses, but I see that you're taking an antidepressant. What's going on with that? And he was like, well, you know, after the heart thing, I was feeling a little down and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, dude, we need to put that on there. This is important. This is a piece. You don't identify as someone who's living with depression because mental illness hasn't been something for your whole life. But when you have major heart issues, it's very common that someone experiences depression. Let's go back and add that on the diagnoses list. So the medication piece can be helpful for like cross-checking. Did I remember everything? Did I put everything down? Medical treatment, section 8 there, is just asking if you are currently being treated for any physical or emotional conditions. So then section 8 continues on the next page. You'll see it's a pretty comprehensive listing asking for the name of a facility or office that you've been to, name of a healthcare professional, contact information, when you visited, what type of visit it was. Was it an outpatient visit? Was it an emergency room visit? Were you actually admitted to the hospital? And then in the middle, the long horizontal pages, what medical conditions were treated, what kind of treatment was provided, and then were there any tests? This page and this information is something that you need to collect for every medical professional that you have seen for anything related to your disabilities, particularly in the last 3 to 5 years. You don't typically need information from the initial accident 25 years ago. It's really, again, these medical things are about who is treating you now, meaning the last current to 3 to 5 years. Who's treating you? What are they treating you for? What's your level of involvement? And the reason that this page is very important, and there are several pages just like this. There are enough pages there for every, any clinic, any hospital, any person that you've been to see. This is the piece of information that Social Security Disability is going to use to gather your records, to review them carefully, to see what information is there to support or not support your claim of disability. So this is where, when Brooke and I work with folks, we also tend to spend a lot of time trying to gather this. It's also something a lot of people don't remember. And that's where we can really be helpful because we may see something about a medication or a diagnosis, but you're not mentioning where that happened. So we'll say, did you ever see anybody for that? Yeah, I saw somebody in Reno, but I'm really not sure who it was or where, and I don't remember when. Wow, well, do you remember if it was in the winter? Was it snowy? Or was it in the summer? Was it really hot? Okay, do you remember the part of town? Well, let's go online. Let's look what hospitals are in that part of town near the university. And so we do a lot of detective work to try to get specifically the location, the phone numbers, everything, so that the Social Security Administration can track down any records that might be there. In terms of treatment, what treatment did you receive for the above conditions? The treatment, if it's an emergency room, it could be, x-rays and a cast. If it's treatment at your primary care, it could be assessment of physical needs and referral for physical therapy, right? So treatment could be a referral to something else, so that's important to list. And then of course we'll do the detective work together to figure out where the heck did you get physical therapy? Where were you living at the time? Can we track it down based on your location? So that's a really, really important part. Okay, and then there's more of those pages. There's like 6 of those, and we can always make copies if if you have more places. So that's the initial piece of what you need to share with Social Security for them to begin looking at. Do we agree that you're not able to work, or do we think that you might be able to and there's something that you're missing there? So when you do the application process, I want to go through this particular slide because it lets you know explicitly how that process works. So number one there is when you actually start the application. That begins either when you call Social Security and say, hey guys, I want to apply for disability, or you go online and start an application online, or you deliver some of these documents that we've talked about to the office. That's starting the application. Number two, the very first thing the Social Security Administration does is they look at your non-medical eligibility, meaning the Social Security SSDI disability insurance application that we completed. They're going to look to see, is there any financial pay-in that you have? Do you qualify for disability insurance based on your work history, right? And at that point, many applicants who haven't paid into the system will get a denial letter. Says you're denied for Social Security disability insurance. And some people are like, that's it, I'm all done, I don't qualify. No, 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 no. That just means you haven't paid into the system, and so you don't qualify for that particular aspect of Social Security disability, right? So that first denial letter, you want to read it carefully, because it may just be saying, hey, you haven't paid into the system, so you're not getting paid under SSDI. But guess what? There's that other thing that we talked about, right? Supplemental security income. So that's still on the table. So if you get that first denial, do not freak out. It's okay. Then they will also look at your financial needs. So they begin to evaluate with SSI, supplemental security income. Is this somebody that we can offer some financial support based on their financial situation? So that's the first thing that the administration does. Once they determine that and notify you, they will then take all of that application packet that you worked so hard to complete, and they're going to give it to an office in Roseville called Disability Determination Services. You'll see another acronym for that, DDS. This is actually a branch of social services in California that is trained to evaluate the medical aspect of your application. So number 3 there, they transfer the claim to Disability Determination Services. And number 4, this is the hard part. This is the hurdle that's really, really important. This is who looks at what you've described about your experience, and they pull all your medical records. Every place that you've told them has medical records for you. They solicit those records and they look through them, and they look to see, have the medical professionals documented functional deficits that indicate you cannot work? So that's what they're looking for. Once they decide, thumbs up, thumbs down, number 5, Disability Determination Services gives their decision about the medical disability back to the Social Security Administration, and it is then, number 6, that you get a notification from Social Security of, we found you to be disabled, or we did not find you to be disabled. This is the response that's really important for you to pay attention to. And if you're approved, then woohoo, you get money, and it goes back to the first date that you started the application. About 75% of people are denied at this point. And usually the denial is due to insufficient medical information. So when you get a denial there at number 6, if you get notified by Social Security that, hey, we got your information, we agree that you're living with depression and really bad arthritis, but we think there's some other kinds of work that you could do where you could earn more money than disability insurance is going to provide to you. So at that point, that's a really good time, even if you've applied on your own, it's a really good time to call and make an appointment with Brooke or with me to look over that letter to see what are the reasons for the denial and what can we do to address those. In some cases, when we look at the reasons for denial, you might look at them too and go, you know, you're right, I think I can do better than this. I think I can probably make more money doing this part-time job that I've been trying to do than Social Security. And we'll say, that's cool, just keep up with your medical professionals and make sure that they are continuing to document any functional issues you have, because down the road it might be the case that you are not able to earn more than you would get through disability. Flip side of that is we look at it and go, wow, how in the world could they get all of that medical documentation and think that you are totally able to go work, 20, 30 hours a week and make more money? What is wrong with them? Like, how do you look at that? So the first thing there we do is they'll list exactly who they got medical records from. So we'll look at those records and go, I see that they got records from these 6 places, but we gave them 10 places. So that means 4 doctors didn't provide the documentation we asked them to provide. So that's when we go, okay, we're gonna appeal this, and the way that we're gonna start that out is contacting those doctors and saying, hey, did you give me that information? I want that, or you get it to, Social Security. So it could be you've got plenty of medical documentation, they just didn't get it all. And they try really hard to get it from every provider that you give them, but some places are just ornery and they're just not going to do it. So we have to rattle their cage a little bit. It also could be that maybe you have a disability, but like a lot of folks in our area, you're like, Western medicine, I don't think so. My neighbor does acupuncture, that's who's taking care of me. I don't have a primary care doctor, and you don't have a medical history. It's at that point that we say, okay, we need to appeal this and we need to establish a medical history. You need to be seeing some doctors who can give the medical information, because Social Security really doesn't care if you're being treated by somebody and you're getting great results from a Reiki practitioner or someone else like that. Chances are Social Security really doesn't care about that. They want to see what the medical doctors say. So a denial is not the end of your application. It is a starting point for what else do we need. So what is Social Security looking for when you turn in that application? First of all, they're going to check, have you paid into Social Security? Have you done work on the books for at least 5 of the last 10 years? They're going to also look at, can you do substantial work? And for 2018, substantial work means earning $1,180 a month. So if you are doing work or can do work where you earn that much or more, that's probably what you want to be doing, because you're going to be making more money doing that than you will with your disability. So they're looking at that as well. The third thing up here on the slide is in red because it is the most important aspect of this. If you are working with a doctor and you are thinking about applying for Social Security, it is imperative that you talk with your doctor and say, hey, I'm really running into some problems working. I keep trying and it's not working for whatever reason. Every time my boss gives me feedback, I dissolve into tears for 2 hours because I can't regulate my emotions. I'm working with a psychiatrist, can't get it done. Or I'm a shelf stalker and I've been doing really well and I've been getting physical therapy for my carpal tunnel and all that stuff, but I have to go home and rest for like 10 hours and it means I can't take care of my kids. So functional stuff is really, really important. The reason it's important to talk to your doctors, your psychiatrists, your therapists about this is that some doctors think that if they write in the case notes, Brooke is permanently disabled, that Social Security will go, oh yes, the doctor says you are permanently disabled, here's your money. Not going to happen. Social Security really doesn't care what your doctor's opinion is. They don't really care what they think or what they tell them to do. What's really important is that the doctor writes down, Michelle reports that after working, an 8-hour shift stocking shelves, she has to lay in bed for 12 hours or for 2 days before she's able to move again and even do dishes or make a meal for her family, right? So if you're thinking about applying for disability, it's time to start talking to your doctors about that and give them the information that they need to document your limitations. And again, it's about how it affects your life. That's what Social Security Disability Determination Services are looking at. How does it impact your life? So that's also the part of this where I say, if you're not working with any medical professionals for the issues that are keeping you from being able to work, we need to get you connected with some medical professionals to begin developing this documentation. If you don't have that documentation right now, there's no point in your applying right now. Okay. All right, and just a review of the kind of information that you need to be collecting as you're preparing to apply. You need contact information and dates of treatment for every medical professional you've seen, especially in the last 3 to 5 years. If you have copies of your medical records, hang on to those because we can send them in. Social Security will request your medical records, but if you have them and you can just give them to them when you walk in, how much quicker is that response going to be? A lot quicker. So you don't have to take the time to gather those records, but if you have them, we want to give them. Okay? We already talked about listing every medical or mental health diagnosis. Again, it's not a requirement that you do that, but I strongly suggest that you work on yourself so that you get in a headspace where you can do that. Any medical tests you've had, current medications, we already talked about that. We talked about having contact info for somebody else who knows your challenges, employment history. One piece that's important, the date that you became unable to work. This is a date that several of these applications are going to request. So you want to look at your work history, look at when did I really become unable to continue to work. Write that down big somewhere, and you want to use that exact date every place. You don't want it to be a month off or 3 days off, because then Social Security is like, what the heck? You know, so you want to make it as easy as possible for them to understand what's going on. Dates and locations of marriages and divorce, dates and locations of education and training. All right, so now here's all this overwhelming stuff. So what do you do now, right? So now is when you can either take some forms with you. I have all the forms that you would need to initiate your application. I also have a packet here that can help you do this online if you're interested in applying online. Or if you would like to sit down for some one-on-one support with this. If you have a head injury, I'll ask you to schedule with my colleague Brooke. And if you don't, I'll ask you to schedule an appointment with me. Take this packet home. Our phone number is right there. We are here Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4. Call anytime. We'll make an appointment for some time to really sit down and figure out what's going on. I think that's my last slide. Let me check. Yes, that's my last slide. So are there any questions about this? I've given you a whole lot of information and you haven't had a chance to talk. So do you have any questions?
Are the forms and applications available in alternative format, for instance, large print?
As a matter of fact, they are. You can go on the Social Security website or call them and request a large print format, and they will send it out to you in that format.
You mentioned the different steps of the application, but how long does it take to go from when I turn my application in to when I get approved or denied?
That's a really good question, and there's a lot of variability there. When we were talking about the steps that it goes through, and step 4 or whatever is when it goes to Disability Determination Services, if you happen to have had all of your medical records, you just are one of those people that keeps up with them, and we turn all those in with the application, the turnaround time could be within a month or 2. If we don't have that and Disability Determination Services has trouble getting those records from the providers, it takes as long as it takes them to get the records and then be able to review. So for some people, it's a pretty quick turnaround, and for some people, it can take several months because it can sometimes be hard to get their records.
On the report where we mention our medication, do you recommend that a person applying include if they're taking CBD? Because in the state of California and other states it's been approved, but it's a federal application, not a state application.
Yeah, that's a question I get a good bit because, of course, cannabis is a big industry in our area, but also, like you said, medical marijuana has been legal in California since '74, and then we just, in the 17 voting approved recreational cannabis. I do, for the very reasons that you mentioned, that this is a federal application, I do encourage people to refrain at this time from listing any medical cannabis use.
So you mentioned on a part of this application that we need to list our therapies and treatments. Does that include talk therapy, for instance, if we're working with a therapist?
So yes, you definitely do want to list any kind of talk therapy in addition to physical therapy. So if you're seeing an EMDR therapist or supportive counselor or anything like that, you definitely do want to list that person on your medical providers pages.
So for the short-term disability, if I was planning to have a knee or hip replacement or some sort of medical procedure, how long in advance should I begin the process of applying for the short-term disability?
So that's a really good question. And first of all, I wanted to again just say the short-term, the state disability, the SDI, that's through the state, your short-term disability. And it is good to plan ahead to know you're going to be applying, and you can actually fill out most of the paperwork and maybe even get the doctor to fill it out, but you cannot apply until 8 days after your first day of work missed. So you can't apply ahead of time, but you can complete all of your paperwork, which is just a few pages on that red and white application, get all of that information together and ready, and then after you've missed like 7 days of work, you can then put it in the mail or activate the application online. So you can't do it ahead of time, but you can prep it so that when you're feeling all terrible from your surgery, it's all ready to go.
So with working into the system, you said that you have to work 5 of the past 10 years. Does it matter if you work part-time or full-time for that?
Whether you work part-time or full-time in and of itself is not important. What is important is when I say working 5 out of the last 10 years, that's a very generic way of looking. What Social Security actually does is they go back and look at all the quarters of work in the last 10 years. And a quarter of work means, just like it sounds, it's a 3-month period. So January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September. And there's a certain amount of money that they're looking for you to have earned in each of those quarters, and they count how many quarters of work. You can typically earn a quarter of work with part-time employment. So it doesn't always have to be full-time. But what they're looking at is over that period of time, how many of those quarters have you earned X amount of dollars for whatever that year's quarter is. So they're actually looking, Social Security is looking at it a little more specifically than just 5 of the last 10. But I use that just as kind of an average way to look at your own work history. I'd be glad to, when we're working one-on-one, I'll be glad to look up what exactly the definition of quarter would be, the amount would be, and we can look at what your income has been and if it fits into that definition.
If someone is working and needs to enter into drug and alcohol rehab, can they get short-term disability for while they are in residential treatment facility?
Often, yes. This is something that I talk to people about who are working so that they can feel more comfortable that they're going to be able to provide some support for their families while they're in treatment. So if you're working full-time, part-time, and you are going to go into, for example, like a residential treatment program where you're not going to be able to work, you absolutely can apply for short-term disability for that period of time when you're in treatment. Yes, you absolutely can, and I would encourage that.